Today, with Gardening with the Masters, we welcome Master Gardener Jim Peters. As a kid, Jim ate from the gardens of his parents and grandparents, and he quickly learned to never confess boredom in their presence, as he would quickly be put to work weeding, watering, and tending the plants. This early exposure to delicious homegrown food, combined with his work experience in both restaurant and furniture industries, set the stage for him to become the gardener that he is today. His garden was included in last year's Placitas Garden Tour, where he astounded many visitors with his unique garden, all in various upcycled, recycled, and reused containers. He's grown everything from paprika to loofahs to spaghetti squashes. Today, he will talk with us about starting seeds and his approaches to the challenges of high desert gardening for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time afterwards for questions and answers.
Thanks, Meg. Is it my turn now, or you still have more to say?
It's your turn.
Okay, here we go. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Peters. I live in Placitas, New Mexico, at an elevation of about 5,200 square feet with wonderful winds. As my wife says, it's the dustiest place on the face of the earth. And I think we're getting dirt from Arizona, California, and every place else. But you get used to that after a while, and you have to incorporate that in your growing seasons. I started actually, as Meg alluded to, very young, and it was ingrained in us because back in those days, my grandparents, my mother had all lived through both the Great Depression and World War II. So rationing was involved. So quickly, gardening became a way of life, as did canning. And today we're starting to see a little bit of that also with the pandemic, and who knows with what wars may take place in the future. But as a result, I have a couple things to tell you. Number one, buy your seeds early. They sell out quickly. It's when you get your catalogs in January, it's very tantamount to, oh my goodness, the Sears catalog just arrived, the Christmas catalog. And you can look through all of it right now, and you loved it. I do the same thing with catalogs. And I've learned that there are so many things that can be done. Some work for me, and some will work for you. And at the same time, some won't work for you because of the difference in elevation or the actual surrounding environment that you have. I have a walled courtyard that I grow everything in. Well, not everything, but most things. And I want to tell you that I'm going to try to give you some hints today. I've taken away hints from other Master Gardener presentations. I want you to do the same thing today. If you have more interest in the true science behind seed germinations and everything else, our Sandoval County Master Gardeners website has a lot of great videos on it. I've attended some of them, and I've learned from every one of them. And hopefully you're going to learn something here today too. I'm going to start out with three things I'm calling them my Master Gardener hints that I think everybody should pay attention to. My Master Gardener hint number one is always make sure that you have high quality seeds. Buy high quality seeds. I'm going to have a slide come up here in a minute, but when I first moved here, I guess if we could see the first slide that we actually have that started me on my gardening tour here in New Mexico. This is what my slides are going to look like, see, starting in container gardening, but my next slide will actually show when we moved here, we were renting, and we were in dire need of the taste of having fresh tomatoes and other things, especially when you grow up in the restaurant business. You go, oh, fresh vegetables. You've got to have them. And once you leave and all of a sudden you're somewhere where you know you can get it, you go, can I get the fresh vegetables from a farmer's market or the store? The reality is a farmer's market, or grow them yourself, in my opinion. But that's how I started. You can see the garden. We did it all in containers. We did it on the cheap, believe it or not. recycled containers, with the exception of the 4 rolling containers that we had down at the bottom by Olive, our little dog there, because we didn't know what our sun was. I learned very quickly that from Sam Thompson, in fact, when I went to one of her presentations, she said, you have one of the best tools in the world to determine how to plant your garden, and that's your cell phone. Go out and take pictures of what the sun looks like at different times of the day during the different seasons. And you can kind of put together a program, what works for you in the area that you want it to work. So the items on wheels there, I could actually roll around left and right, didn't make any difference. But as I said, gardener hint, master gardener hint number 1, next slide, please, is buy high quality seeds. And you can see that from the names and the sources, I buy seeds everywhere. I just don't live with one catalog. If I find something that's interesting, I buy it, number 1, but I keep using a lot of the same seeds over and over and over again. There was a reason for that, and I'll get into that in a minute with you. The second thing that I believe that you really want, let's call this master gardening hint number 2, buy seeds that are going to work in your area. They're going to grow in your area. Here I'm actually starting peppers, because guess what? Peppers grow in New Mexico. It's one of the big cash crops in the southern part of the state. So the key to starting peppers is, and again, there's going to be various different opinions on this. Some people will say, put them in a refrigerator, let them cool down for 3 days, because that makes them think that they're coming out of the winter and it's time for them to grow. The second part of that is to actually put them in a chamomile tea for 24 hours to soften the shells, or I've also heard black tea. Now, chamomile tea works. I was going to try black tea this year, but I didn't have any, so I used chamomile tea. And then put them into the soil, and they go on a heat mat, which you can see on the right-hand side there with a dome that's covered. But let's go back a little bit on that, because it's most important that when you take the seeds from the left that you've got ready to go, that your soil is already in your containers. And you know, when people talk about containers, they go, what kind of containers? Well, buy good containers. Everybody's familiar with what I call the 10-20. And this is a 10-20. I think you can see it. It's a tray. And everybody goes, why do they call it a 10-20? Because it's 10 inches by 20 inches. And it fits little seed packs, 6 packs I call them. It fits squares, different sizes. It fits rectangulars. It fits round ones of all different sizes. And you're going to need all those things. That's probably number 3, master gardening hint 3, is have great containers or the proper containers. Let's go back to master gardener hint 2. Number 2, make certain that you're going to grow items that are going to work in your area. Again, peppers, we know. And let me change 3. Let me say 3 should be grow things that you want to grow and you know you're going to use. Don't grow something so exotic that there's not a chance you're going to use it. I try something different every year, and if we like it, we may grow it again. If not, boy, out the door it goes very, very quickly. So anyways, as Meg said, I grew up in the restaurant industry and I really wanted to taste wonderful foods. And I never thought my mother was that good a cook, but I realized that we were growing stuff that worked in zone 5B or 5A at that time. And I said, I'll never do this again. I'm going to make enough money that I'm going to be able to hire a gardener or buy things directly. And I said, okay, let's try this. I asked my uncle, why do we have only yellow corn? Why can't we have silver queen? He said, we don't have a long enough period of time. I said, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. And I'm learning these things years over years over years. If I can see the next slide. When I start my seeds, again, I've shown you the 10-20 trays. You can see a lot of them there. You can see rounds. You can see the 6 packs, the 4 packs. But the other important thing there is, don't forget, whatever you're going to do, to make certain that you mark everything that you put in. The reason being, as my daughter did last year, she had a bunch of Black Beauty tomatoes, and she didn't mark them, and she had other types of varieties of tomatoes, and she gave them away to her friends, and none of them were coming out black like the Black Beauty that she thought she was giving them away. She never marked them. She learned a very valuable lesson. So make sure whatever it is, you can see tags in every picture there. When I see that most people ask me what I'm doing in terms of watering, when I'm planting the seeds, I made a joke earlier. I said, I use slave labor. I let my grandchildren come and fill up the 6-packs. They can sit at a tray, level them off. They don't pack it down. I take those 6-packs, I put them in a 10-20 tray. I take them outside and I water them. You got to make certain that you have water in your seed trays before you ever plant the seeds. And the reason being to do that is, if you don't, you're going to have this little moisture on top of your tray, but not the whole thing. So normally they sit around for a couple of days where I've watered the trays and they're out just drying out and draining so that you're not going to drown your seeds at the same time. And then I actually take what's called a dibble or a dibbler. This is a dibble or a dibbler to indent a hole on the seeds that it's necessary for me to do. Can everybody see that? You can just do this. I also use it for reseeding. I also use it for planting plants in the garden, because it's probably about 1.5 to 2 inches, depending on, no, 1.5 probably. That I use that when I'm poking holes. I can do a layout of the garden and my seeds. So once I germinate the seeds, they're growing from there. But I'm getting ahead of myself, I think, a little bit. The other things that you want to do, that most people, when you plant your seeds, don't take a water hose. I take a mister, and this is connected to a hose, but it's just a fine mister. I hated squeezing the bottle to miss the seeds or the solution. So I have a hose set up like this that I can just press a little lever and it puts out a mist of moisture on my seeds. Think of a tsunami. If you're using a regular garden hose or a nozzle, you can blow all the seeds right on out and never realize it. So the mister helps a lot. Once you've done that, in some cases, it tells you to bury the seeds. Some cases that you leave the seeds on top. Read the instructions on the back of the seed. They tell you exactly what you need to do. If I have to press them down, I'm going to use, a lot of times I use my spoon. It's a large tablespoon. I use this for several different things. I can press down the seeds in there. I also have some other tools that I use. But the other thing I can do is I can dig out my seedlings later when I want to transplant them. And when I'm putting them in from the 6-pack into the container, I can hold the seedling by its stalk or its leaves and take my dirt and fill it in all the way around without killing, crushing, or disturbing seedlings. They are very, very easy to hold. You can't really hurt them. They can take a lot more than you think. And that's typically how I do it. The other thing that I end up doing, dibble or dibbler, according to Google. Yes, 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 all of the above. The other thing I end up using, and again, most of this stuff I'm getting from the restaurant business. Geez, a scoop, but a good scoop, one that's made of metal, that I can move large quantities of dirt. I have probably 3 or 4 different sizes that I use depending on the type of pot or whether I'm moving dirt out of one location into another. Never plant the same vegetable in the same spot again. So when you're doing seedlings and germinating, you're not putting it in the same spot. You're starting with quality seeds and then a quality soil mix. So a soil mix, a growing mix, there are three that come to mind immediately for me. There's Miracle Grow, there's Kellogg's, there's Jiffy. They all have potting soils that you can use. If you're using high quality seeds, why cheat on the growing mixture? You wouldn't want to do that, and then put it in the right pot. I know a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, we had a presentation where somebody was putting a lonely seed in a gigantic pot. It wasn't going to work. I can tell you through trial and error, there are a lot of things I've learned about. Some plants will work in here, some won't. Some seeds you can probably put in there if you're trying to grow like a bunch of basil all at the same time. But I'm probably getting ahead here of some things. Let me go back to seed starting, filling them out, putting quality seeds in quality mix in quality containers, and then the right amount of light and water. We talked about the water, the misting of it. Some seeds will require that they have light. Other seeds will require that they are covered and they are in darkness. And if you're not getting those just right at times, you may have not quite the success that you thought you were going to have. And then finally, once you missed all the seeds, I want you to put a dome cover on your container, and it doesn't have to be a 10-20 container. I'm using old Tupperware containers and everything else that I find lying around to start stuff with. And then everybody goes, well, what about a dome? Well, this is something that goes back to my days with my grandmothers and it looks like a hairnet, doesn't it? But they sell these things in large quantities, and you can just take this and put it right over the top of your container, and you have an automatic dome for your container. And the 10-20 trays, boy, when I first bought them, they came with a dome and everything else. Well, the domes deteriorate after years. So you know what you can use next? You can use, I know it's a film. I call it saran wrap. To me, it's the same. Cling film, whatever you call it, it's there. And it fits perfectly over the 10-20 tray. Just don't forget to remove it after the seedlings start popping up. Otherwise, you're going to kill them. What am I forgetting about that? Probably nothing when it comes to that. I'm sorry, there's so much information here that it takes me a while and I have to replenish my notes. I have several of them that are on heat mats because certain seeds will do much better on heat mats, peppers specifically. Certain seeds will do better if you soak them before you plant them. Again, read the instructions. We have a list of things that you probably want to soak. I have a list of them that I'll share with you. Basil, beets, beans, chilies, cilantro, corn, cucumbers, dill, parsley, peas, peppers, squash, and Swiss chard. All those items can be soaked in water and or tea. Depending, tea is the preferred one, I think, for peppers. All the rest of them, I just use water that I soak them in. Again, there's all kinds of containers. You can use a bowl from the kitchen, although your wife or husband may not like that. You can use that, that works. Old Tupperware containers work. Old containers that come with your laundry detergent that you pour your laundry soap into your washing machine. You can fill those up with water, put your seeds in them. You can keep them separated, because if you're trying to put out 10 or 15 seeds in a day, you're out in your greenhouse or you're at your kitchen table, you want to make certain every bowl is separate. Well, you don't want great big quart bowls for each set of seeds because some of the seeds are so small you can hardly see them. So that's what I end up doing with that stuff. And again, I talk about covering it up because that's really important. It keeps the moisture in there and it will allow the seeds to pop up all at one time. Part of this germination process and the growth is once they pop up, they germinate, you can see them. Take your dome off, take your saran wrap off, take whatever you're covering I've seen people use rotisserie chicken containers that they can use. You can go to a lot of the stores now, they have the aluminum, I call them steam table pans, because again, in the restaurant business, we had steam table pans. Well, now they sell aluminum ones with plastic domes on them too, which are really inexpensive. They might even be cheaper than buying the 10, 20 trays, and you get a new lid each year rather than paying an outrageous amount for a plastic dome. You can buy those, you can put them in there. The hard part is separating them at a later date. That's why I like the seed pack, the 6-pack to 4-pack. I can take the end of the spoon, dip it in there, pull it out, and transplant. When you're doing just throwing it in, you have to do it, as I call, separating the seeds once they germinate by teasing them apart. I do a lot of romaine lettuce that I just throw them all in. The seeds are so small, my wife even got me magnifying glasses so I could see them. So I didn't have like 300 all in one little spot. The reality is you're going to have a bunch of them, they're all going to grow together anyway. So you can tease them apart, but you got to be very careful because you can rip the roots off, especially when you're doing hydroponics. What I do a lot of times is I just take the whole plant where there's a whole bunch of them. I may dig up, a chunk of them. And I learned this at a nursery when I was working there. They'll dig up a whole bunch of them and they'll tease them apart. And then they'll use their dibbler or something else to punch a hole to plant them. Make certain that you get all the roots in there, otherwise they're going to die. If those roots are outside and you don't get them covered up, they're going to die. But with my romaine, I tease them apart, and then I can put them in little styrofoam, and not styrofoam, foam rubber inserts that I put in my hydroponic gardens. And that brings them all to life. And you can do that with every plant out there. I do it with beets. I do it with flowers, French marigolds, all the lettuces, kales, spinaches. I can do all of those. I don't know if spinaches is a word or not, but different varieties you can do. And that makes it fairly simple from that standpoint. I would like for a moment to just digress and also say, we talked about high quality seeds. Some seeds are heirloom, some seeds. Now my grandmother had a different word other than heirloom for the seeds, but the reality is certain seeds are going to be around for 40 plus years, and they're the ones that they're going to be the same year after year after year. She called them what'd she call them? The difference between an heirloom and a heritage. She bought the same seeds from the same nursery or feed store every year. And it was like, we never had a variety of tomatoes, and I like a variety of tomatoes. I like a variety of peppers, all of those different things. But there's there's the heirloom seeds, which have been around for 30 plus years. They're going to be the same. They've been bred the same. Naturally, changes have taken place. They're going to be your best bet probably, unless something has been grown and designed for a specific area. An example of that might be a tomato that is bred for a very humid, hot location. We have a hot location. We don't have the humid location. And I have 3 different varieties that I typically try to grow a little bit later in the year. Heat Master, Solar Fire, and one other one which escapes me at this moment. But I have several that we can show. There's a list later, I think, Meg, that of varieties that I grow consistently all the time, because they are easy to grow. Anybody can grow the cherry tomatoes, but the organic tomatoes, everybody says, well, what's organic versus heirloom? I said, well, organic is actually dictated by the Food and Drug Administration. So they're the ones that dictate what they are. They can't have any fertilizer on the property for other than natural fertilizers. They can't use any chemicals for 5 years. And that makes a difference. They can grow almost anything, but you're going to find that they're going to have different types of natural fertilizers, whether it be cow manure or chicken manure or something along those lines. They're also going to have, some of them are going to use what they would say are organic seeds. Those are chemical free, again, judged by the USDA. There are going to be open pollinated seeds and hybrid seeds. And if you find one of those that you like, you can't save those seeds. You've got to get them again. You've got to buy them from the same manufacturer. That's kind of important. So yes, there are some hybrid seeds that I do use that I like, that I will use. Again, it's one of those that what works at my elevation may not work at your elevation, but don't be afraid to try it. But I think the most important thing on the seeds is if you like tomatoes, grow tomatoes. If you don't like tomatoes, don't grow. And anybody can grow cherry. And then after that, I really like a whole bunch of them, which I have on a list also. If we can see another slide, Scott, I could probably give you a little bit more input that whatever the next one is in the presentation there. It just helps people, not next one, please. You're going to see the greenhouse that I utilize. You're going to see in those pictures, the one on the left is showing the tables that I bring the seeds out to, and I let them harden off. You can run your hand over them. The one thing, again, you can learn from this is don't be afraid to touch your plants, to shake them. On pepper plants, I run my hand over the top of them so that it replicates the wind so that they're used to all that stuff. That's why they're coming out. On the right-hand side, you can see I utilize things from my restaurant background. I'll have the bus trays that I hold dirt in. And I have, you can see my little mister all the way down the right-hand side, that curly hose. It is where I set my misters so that it's always handle. I try to keep a high humidity in the greenhouse, but I also have a little fan that I've rigged up there to keep the flow of air going. I have music, I have scissors, knives, and anything else that I can think of that I might, paper towels to wipe my eyes, Kleenex, you know. Oh, you gotta have all that stuff in your greenhouse. It's stuff that you're gonna use. Next slide, please. That's the external, the internal. This is hardening off the new plants. And again, once you've germinated them, they're gonna come up fast. Once they have the second set of leaves, you can actually transplant them. And I have a whole bunch of these trays that once I put them into the next size container, and they will be transplanted 3 times before I consider the plant ready to be planted into the garden. But that's showing the watering wand that I use. It's connected to a hose that I will use. You can't use that when it's seedlings because it's like a tsunami, but once they're outside, you can water the plants. Before they go into the final resting spot to grow, you can water the leaves and the tops of the tomatoes. They're not gonna have a problem at that moment in time. Once they're in their plant and you have all the other organisms and the fresh compost and everything in there, you want to water bottom only. And the next slide, please. I'm often asked, I told you we were at 1 mile high, 5,200 feet elevation. Growing things in containers can be a challenge at times. You can see I use tomato cages. What you're not seeing in this particular area is how I hold those tomato cages in place with winds that hit 50 miles an hour plus. The slide on the left is showing an enclosed area, those tall towers I use for melons and peas, and I rotate them out again. They allow them to grow up. I took 2 tomato cages back to back. I believe in using everything that we have. I just kind of cable tied them together to give them the height that they can go. They can go that high and taller, but that's enclosed in an area. You can see the metal fencing that is used in the middle and right picture, and it's enclosed because I have learned that dogs think that squash leaves and bean plant leaves are like filet mignon, and they chew on them constantly. If you don't have them closed, they're going to take over. But with the tomato plants that you're seeing in the second picture, you're also seeing a companion plant that I go along with them and I use all kinds of them, but almost every tomato plant, you're going to see a basil plant, and you're also going to see peppermint. And I keep the peppermint in the container in the center. You can see the sunken little pots that have the peppermint in them. The reason I do that is if you don't, you're going to find that the peppermint will take over everything, and you don't want that. You don't want the peppermint to take over the tomatoes. You just want the peppermint there to keep the mice away. The basil is going to make your tomatoes sweeter. Companion-wise, I also use carrots. I also have onions because tomatoes love all of those. So then finally, with that fence in the background, there are 2 different types. I know you're all aware of this, of tomato plants. There's a determinate and an indeterminate. Determinate is only going to get so big, it's going to produce fruit basically and be done for the year. The indeterminate is going to go on forever and ever until the frost comes. The indeterminate will get, I've had them as tall as 12 feet. And when they get that, you only have a 50-inch cage, which is about a little over 4 feet, you're going to run into problems of how do I keep those tomatoes contained? And how am I going to keep them from the cage falling over or the planter from falling over? And in this particular case, I use bungee cords to connect the tomato cage to the fence to keep the windows from blowing it over. Can I see the next slide? Because I think it also shows that the picture on the left will show you I have bungee cords that are holding the planters down. Those happen to be determinate tomatoes in there, so I'm not worried about their height, but the bungee cords will hold the planters down from being blown over by the wind. And there's nothing worse in the world than walking out the next morning and seeing 4 or 5 containers all blown over with tomatoes that were going to be ready to be picked in about a week, and you were ready to enjoy. So that's kind of important. Then the other thing, and I don't think I have any slides at all of it, that I do when I'm dealing with indeterminate tomatoes is I put in bamboo poles inside the tomato cages. And I use some clamps, or you can just twist off some wire on that. Again, there's all kinds of different foam wires and plant wires and clamps out there that you can use. And you can connect your tomato plants to it and just keep growing on up. Now I'm 6 feet tall, so I can obviously reach almost 8 feet beyond that. Yeah, I need a step ladder too. And in terms of harvesting, it's really simple. Even if you're using pole beans and cane poles, you just bend it over and pick off your peas and let it go right back on up. But you can see on the right-hand side, I'm using a bungee cord to connect that tomato cage to the container that is elevated, so I don't have to bend over again. Next, and there's a bungee cord on the front of it that's holding it down to what it's upon. Can we go ahead? Can the tomato be trained to support sun? Yes, you can train tomatoes to do anything, but they're going to need some support no matter what. These were pictures from the Garden Tour that we were in, and that shows a little bit more of the garden. You can see in the top picture, I use stainless steel tables again, that from my restaurant background growing up there. They don't deteriorate. You don't have to worry. They're easy to move if you want to change the configuration. There are the containers that are up on blocks and wood. It's as cheap as I can go. The cement blocks might be $2.50 a piece, and the wooden landscape timbers are about $3 a piece. But you can change the height depending on what you need. I decided if I was ever going to be in a wheelchair and I needed to lower it, I could. And it would be easy. I could still have my garden. If I move, if my wife says we're leaving, I can take everything with me. The pots on the right top are just lemon trees that we are growing outside. They're in a little bit shaded area. We've had them for, I guess, 3 years now. Behind that on the fences is where I grow gourds. And in the big pot on the right, I grow loofah. It goes up into the tree. Everybody thinks loofah sponges come from the sea. They do not. They are a gourd. On the bottom left, there are a couple things that are shown. One, you can see melons growing up in the center. To the left is a caged-in area that I use. I had the nicest stand of beets until the ground squirrels came along and decided to dig everything up. So I just took some PVC pipe and some 1/4-inch wire and put cable ties on it to keep everything out. There's a lid on it at the same time. I can lift it up and reach anything in there. I can still get water. I can still get sun in there. On the right-hand side, bottom, that was actually some of the stuff we got from our garden last year. But what I was trying to show too were paprika peppers. There's actually a paprika pepper in the plant. I showed people how it was dehydrated in the dehydrator. And then I showed people the actual paprika powder that you get out of your garden just by growing it yourself. Easy to grow. I wouldn't tell you to grow something hard. If I can grow it, anybody can grow it. It's that easy. But thank you, Master Gardeners, for helping me understand that it is that easy and you can use anything you have available. Next slide, please. Resources may in fact be with this, I think, okay. Resources, we're probably going to talk about a couple of the books that I use in gardening. One is Square Foot Gardening, and the other one is Companion Gardening. I don't know if we have that, Meg. Do we have that?
I put the books in the chat.
Okay, so they're in the chat.
And Square Foot Gardening. Yep.
And then finally, there is a list of tomatoes that I recommend for my area. Some will take direct sun, some will not. And that's one of the things. Ask Master Gardeners. A lot of the people know. If you got a specific tomato question, Sam Thompson's probably the best on it. She did a presentation. She was the one that convinced me to that tomatoes were not fragile little infants that you could grab them, shake them, and help pollinate them. I've learned a lot from all of that. And I think finally I may have a video of what the garden looked like 2 years ago. And I changed the garden around virtually every year. So I don't know if we can start that video or not. Okay, again, utilizing stainless steel tables. They don't deteriorate. They can stay in the weather. They don't blow over. Use there's some raised beds. I have perennials in some of them. Then I have, those are, I have my plants that are my pepper plants that don't have high scobles over there. Another raised beds that perennials. I have horseradish growing, garlic growing. Those are pepper plants, or excuse me, those are squash plants. You're going to see spaghetti and butternut, very easy to grow. Those are determinate tomatoes. That was a particular variety. Determinate tomatoes there. Again, you can see the basil in it. And that year was not smart on my behalf to put those tomatoes there. I needed a different variety that didn't get all the sun. You can see cabbage, easy to grow. Tomatillos, easy to grow. Kids love it. I have different tomato plants along the greenhouse. I put some shade cloth on it. I grow all kinds of herbs that we utilize all winter long. We harvest them. We have the mints we take the leaves. My wife dries them, uses them for teas. You can see one composter back there. Old stuff recycled. That's what was a paint platform that you hooked onto the ladders. Again, the greenhouse that you see. I've learned that you can use almost anything for bean poles. Those tomatoes don't get sun all day long, but I've changed that because they're the ones that blew over because of the wind. So that table now has a cold frame on top of it. So I change everything around. I believe I have another video that may be just a little bit different perspective. And again, starting the seeds is easy. Anyone can do it. Remember the 3 hints, buy quality seeds, buy stuff that's going to grow in your area. And 3, try to find stuff that's going to be nutritious for your family and that you love to eat. I could talk on forever probably, but I'm done. I'll entertain questions or whatever I can. Is that long enough for you?
That was great. Thank you, Jim, for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience and wisdom with us. We have some time for questions, and there's a few that have popped up in the chat. There's one that came in through the email. So if everybody who's present would like to add questions to the chat, I'll be happy to ask them. Or if you want to use the raise hand feature, which is under the reactions button, then I can call on you and you can raise your hand and ask your question. You're welcome to turn your videos on now. I see a couple of questions coming in. Let me just get to the ones that came in through the chat while you were speaking, Jim. The first one says, there's so many tips that use plastic-based containers for seed starting. However, it is a constant problem for me that it molds so badly that it kills the seedlings. I simultaneously need to keep it quite damp because I live in an extremely dry climate. What might a solution be?
I use plastic containers. I live in a very dry climate. I'm not certain, do the containers have holes in them? If you don't have holes in the containers, that's a problem. People give me containers all the time and I recycle them. I dip them in a solution of Clorox and water to kill whatever may be in there. One guy brought me a big pot and said, Jim, here's a great pepper container plant. Well, it's actually a waste paper basket. It didn't have any holes in it. First thing I did was drill holes in it and it worked. But if you're getting mold, it seems to me that there's overwatering going on or something. Are you certain that they are getting the ability to drain the water out of the system? I'd love to hear anybody else's comments on that.
Okay, yeah, and Emily, if you want to put more in the chat or unmute, you're welcome to do that. And while you're responding, I have a question about, you talked about soaking seeds, Jim, and how long do you recommend soaking the seeds?
24 hours is what it's typically recommended. Have I let it go on longer? Yes. 24 hours exactly, no. I may start it in one morning, the seeds, and the next day I might not get till noon to go out to the greenhouse to plant things. I've gone 48 hours before. Yeah, it depends on what it is, it'll work. I've done it as little as 8. You're just trying to soften up. The shell is so hard on a lot of seeds that you're trying to soften it up so that when you do plant it, it's got a chance to germinate.
Okay, and I'm going to ask this question just because it needs to be asked, is the tea, if you use the tea, what temperature should the tea be?
I make the tea the day before and it's room temperature and I just pour it in there. I put it into Now, if you're having, I had 28 different varieties of peppers this year that I put in tea. That's why I used the little pill bottles. I would dump anywhere from 8 to 24 seeds in each one and take a 2-cup measuring cup with the tea in it that was made the day before and just pour enough tea on it to cover the seeds. Obviously, pepper seeds are so small, you don't need a lot of tea. 1 tea bag will make your tea typically for what you need.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
A question about what is the purpose of the plastic wrap or the dome over the trays?
Oh, to keep the moisture into your, keep the moisture on your seeds. Again, living in the desert climate, my mother was appalled. She said, "You're watering every day." I said, "Mom, we live in a desert. We have extreme conditions. You know, in Indiana, you don't have to water every day, obviously, but you got to keep the moisture in your seeds. You don't want to drown them. You don't want to have them sitting in water. They need, I think the 3 things are oxygen, moisture, and soil, if I'm not mistaken. If they're sitting in water, now there are some seeds that will germinate in water, hydroponics. I took a course in that, and I have my own little hydroponics thing. But sometimes it's easier just to start them and then transplant them, and with the roots and all. So, did I answer that question for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Next question. When is it too early to start peppers and tomatoes?
How gutsy do you feel? What kind of gambler are you? New Mexico State University puts out an excellent publication. You can look it up, and it gives our first day and last day of frost, etc. And typically, again, read the instructions on the back of the label of the seed envelope. And if you're going to start it, it says start it. I think most of them say 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. And I would say a lot of it has to depend on how much room do you have in your kitchen or your den or your greenhouse as to when you want to start it. I start probably at, I like to think that I start, let's say Valentine's Day with a lot of stuff. I have started stuff earlier. I have grown tomatoes inside the house successfully all winter long. I typically start tomatoes 3 times a year from seeds because we have different distinct seasons. And one of the reasons that I started doing that is because the big box stores are done selling plants by such and such a date. They're into Thanksgiving or Christmas or Halloween already, and you still have a lot of gardening to do. So I may start some seeds January 1st that I'm probably going to grow in the house so that I can get some patio tomato plants that I can start enjoying tomatoes very, very quickly. And then I'll have some that I start, let's say, Valentine's Day, that I'm going to, they'll be hardened off by April 15th. And again, your exact freeze date, and you can look up your freeze date by your zip code. I cheat because I have covers that I can put over my planters if I need to, and I'm not afraid to do that. I have old towels, I have containers of them, I just clamp them on. You know what, sometimes I lose them, but I would rather have a fresh tomato two weeks earlier than wait. So I am one of those gamblers that does it all the time. Peppers are the same way. Peppers typically are going to take a little bit longer, or they're not ready to be planted quite as early as some of the tomatoes. But there's a ton of vegetables you can grow now. You can grow chard and lettuce and spinach, and I start my peas in toilet paper rolls. And everybody goes, why? It's because peas, when they germinate, want to be in the soil and they don't like their roots disturbed. I have a little auger on my drill that I just go out and take the 1.5-inch toilet paper roll and sink the whole thing in there. And when the pea plant goes out, it's already 6 inches tall. And we do a lot of them and we freeze them and have them all year long. So it depends on how much you want to gamble. And again, down in Bernalillo, it's going to freeze, or the last frost date is going to be longer or later than what it is where I live, 200 feet elevated.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. I
Yes,
think you
ma'am.
answered this one during your presentation. Can those very tall tomatoes be trained along a fence for support and sun?
Absolutely, they can. And the reason I say that, while I don't typically do along a fence, hydroponics does that all the time. They are growing them on wires that are typically going horizontal rather than vertical. The key is when you're doing tomatoes, and Sam Thompson can talk to this better, but make certain that you are, in my mind, getting rid of all the suckers, and they will continue to grow for a long time. The energy will be put into the fruit rather than the growing of the vines themselves.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
The next chat is just is a comment that is a public service message, and that is that the Placitas Garden Tour last year was in late September, and so those pictures from Jim's garden are from late September, but mark your calendars now for the garden tour.
Is it going to be in late September again?
Sandy will have to answer that question.
Okay.
She's here.
If you haven't done it, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's the garden tour will be earlier in September, Sunday, September 11th this year.
Okay.
But I know last year you could see visible changes in the garden, you know, with leaf color, because we were, I think it was around the 19th or 20th.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea, we had over 400 people that came through our garden, and most of the docents said the first reaction by everyone was, wow. And of course, I had lots of things that were still growing at that time, but I also had a list of everything that we grew in the garden, which is quite impressive. But some things I wouldn't grow again, I learned. And that's the thing about being a gardener, is don't be afraid of mistakes. We all make mistakes. You just learn from it and go on. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think there, Sam Thompson says the master gardeners have killed the most plants. That's what that means. So.
Oh, I have all kinds of them said, I don't know what this little markers that said dead, unknown. I have no idea. I mean, yes, we do make mistakes. There's no doubt. But again, you can do it. It's easy. You can do it. Okay.
This next question, I think you just covered. It was about the timing of when to start germinating. But you know what, Jim, you had a little secret when we did our rehearsal about putting the date to germination on the back of the thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I tried to mention again using plant markers, and you saw in all the pictures that plant markers are everywhere. Because after a while, they all start to look the same. Plants, you know, they have green leaves, and you've been doing it for hours, and you're going, what was that? I forget. So as I'm doing it, I write in pencil the date that I planted, the item that it is, and typically either on the bottom or the back, I write germ, GERM, and it stands for germination. And if it says from 7 to 14 days, I write 7-14. And if I come back in 21 days and nothing has happened, guess what? It's going to the compost because I did something wrong, or the seeds were not as advertised. And a lot of times you're going to get seeds from friends. I gave some shishito pepper seeds to some friends, and they said, Jim, they didn't come up. And I said, did you put them in vinegar, or did you put them in chamomile tea, like I said, and did you use a heat net? And they said, no. I said, well, you know what? I can show you a tray of them that are coming up for me right now, and there's lots of them. But do use your markers, do put germination dates on it, so that you're not going back in 2 weeks, 3 weeks and go, nothing has happened, why? At least you'll have an idea why, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel to find out.
All right, there was a question that came in on email ahead of our meeting today, and it is about, is it possible to germinate? You just mentioned germinating seeds in toilet paper rolls, and someone wanted to ask about egg crates. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
I've used egg crates before. I saw a video one time on somebody growing radishes in egg crates. And I said, I've got to try this. And yes, it does work. Okay. Two things that you got to know. If it is a styrofoam egg crate, make certain that you put holes in it, because there's no way the water can go anywhere when you're watering your plant. I would prefer the cardboard egg crate if I were going to grow in it. Here's my issue with it. It typically doesn't have quite the same depth that a 6-pack, 4-pack, 8-pack, 98-pack has when you're starting seeds. And number two, you're going to have to dig it out. The configuration is round rather than square. It's more difficult to do when you're using your proverbial spoon to dig things out. It's a little harder in my mind. And if I were doing it, a lot of times something like that, I would try to cut them apart and sink them, but our soil doesn't tend to deteriorate egg cartons. The toilet paper cartons, I can tell, or toilet paper rolls, I can tell you, they deteriorate very, very well. I've done it for years. I just take them, stiff the bottom and forward, fold them over, put a little bit of a coffee filter in it, and then put my soil in it to keep the soil from falling out the bottom. And then I put my seeds in, a little bit of soil to top it off, and the cardboard will hold moisture for you, whereas styrofoam or the plastic ones won't. So hopefully that answers their question on egg crates, but I prefer not to use them. I have done it. Yes, you can grow radishes. They grow up, but it's, and who likes, 4 feet of radishes when you're in your garden? No one that I'm aware of. So.
Somebody else asked if you can start seeds by using wet paper towels.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Again, for me, it's easier the way I do it. It doesn't mean that you can't use. In fact, there's a lot of YouTube videos or videos online that show you how to do different things. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't, don't do it. Try something different. What I do works for me in my location. North Carolina State University has great articles on everything that you can get that from. Go to their website, get it. And here's another little aside. Purdue University in Indiana is a great agricultural school, but the information they're putting out for Indiana farmers is a totally different zone and won't necessarily work in Zone 7B in New Mexico. So always take it with a grain of salt, okay? The computer is going to have a lot of information. Doesn't mean it's always right, but you can be assured that if you're getting it from New Mexico State University, it's going to have the different areas, when to start, when to grow, when to set your seeds out, etc. They've got great calendars in there that I use religious. Also, make certain that you keep a journal for your plants when you want to start them. Some years, and again, a lot of it depends on weather, but I can, like I say, Valentine's Day is when I like to start a lot of it. But I have started tomato seeds in January. And then I start some in the middle of April or end of April, so that I can have that second crop of tomatoes with a very specific tomato that is set for heat, that is bred, for heat. So grown for heat. So it works. I mean, you just got to keep track of it. Thomas Jefferson did that. One of the presidents of the United States did that. He kept a journal. He said, I'm an old man, but I'm a young gardener. So if you keep a journal, it's going to work very well for you. Again, a lot of the information is on New Mexico State University. Our Master Gardener's website has got all this on it. If you want to take time, you're going to learn something each and every time. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, so do a search if you what we learn as master gardeners is to do a search for what you want, like seed starting, and then put NMSU, New Mexico State University, and you'll get a lot of different publications. It is a great resource.
Right.
A couple of questions about the laundry baskets on top of the tomato cages in the video.
I'm not, I don't know, maybe Sam was one, maybe I learned that in growing tomatoes in New Mexico at one point. It serves, and I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, it serves three purposes, okay? Number one, it allows me to shade the tomato plants to some degree. Now, it's not gonna work with indeterminate tomato plants because they're gonna go, 3 feet higher than those. But with determinate, it will shade those a little bit, especially if they're out in the open. Tomato plants only really need 6 hours of sun every day. So if our sun can blister tomato plants in a hurry, but it shades them somewhat. Number two, it allows me to put bird netting over the elevated plants that I have. And some of the birds like different plants. And number three, it allows me to very easily put sunshade, pull it over the whole thing, tarp it off, if you will, and clamp it down easily. It gives me something to clamp to and to hold it in place with the high winds that we have. And I talked about that earlier. Bungee cords are your friends in the windy Placitas.
All right. A question about I think you mentioned this, but maybe, I don't know if you have the exact percentage, but what do you use to sanitize your tacks, your trays, your
90-10 water to bleach.
90%
90% water, 10% bleach. I let them, I have those big plastic tubs with lids on them. I have one of those in my greenhouse, and it has a bleach water solution in there. If I'm done with it, just lift the lid off, throw it in there. Once a week, I can probably clean them out. I have all kinds of brushes that I just kind of try to scrub everything out. You're still going to have some salts or whatever attached to the 6-packs or to the interior of the containers. Typically, you're going to see something, there's going to be some residue, but you've killed the germs at that moment in time. So it's very simple to do it that way.
This is a response from the fungus question.
Yes.
And this Sam Thompson, who's a master gardener, said soil that is kept too damp can lead to fungus that causes a disease called damping off, and it does kill seedlings. So that's what.
Yes, it does. It starts at the base of the seedling and looks like it's dried up, and it just kind of falls over. Things are too wet when that's happening.
Okay, and then a question about how you keep your greenhouse warm enough so that you can start seeds in February and March.
Very carefully. When I first put up my greenhouse 3 years ago, I thought I designed it in such a way that I could bring my containers that are elevated in and grow vegetables all winter long. And it was designed, and we tried that, and we had some success. The reality is the fuel cost, electricity cost, whatever you want to call it, can be outrageous, and it's probably not worth it. I now start a lot of the plants inside the house where I have a consistent temperature of 80 degrees or not 70 degrees, not 80 degrees. But on the heat mats, it's closer to probably 85 on the heat mats. And then once I've done that, I take them out. I have a little heater out there that is a plug-in that every night I go out to the greenhouse and I turn it on a preset setting. Like last night, I think it was got down to 16 degrees here in Placitas, and I had my little heater on, and the coldest it got in the greenhouse was 59, which is fine for plants. Are you going to get growth spurts, no, but they're not going to die either. The worst part about a greenhouse is a wind that comes along and blows panels out, and then you lose everything. Don't be upset at yourself. It happens to everybody. It happens to commercial growers too. Just, regroup, be all right with plan B and start all over again. It's fine. But a little electric heater will do that. I have the panels screwed in tightly so that they can't blow out. Keeps the air. I have a bungee cord on the front to keep the door from being blown open. But there's some things, and I put the dome covers on every night on my 1020 trays if the ceilings are still germinating. I hope that answers that question.
I think so. I have a couple of questions here about tea, and I think you answered some of them. It's okay to use regular tea, I guess, as opposed to a decaf tea. And is it the acid in the tea that expedites the soaking process?
I cannot answer that question. I flunked food science. I had to take it twice at Purdue University, and I'm not going to begin to be a chemist. All I know is the black tea was recommended by the guy that developed the ghost pepper. And he said, either the ghost pepper or the Carolina Reaper, I can't remember, one of those two, which is the hottest Scoville units on the face of the earth. And chamomile tea has been suggested by many master gardeners, and it works. I don't know whether it's decaf or what. I don't know what's in it. Chemistry was not my long suit, trust me.
Okay. We've got several more questions here.
Okay.
Excuse me. Ray says, I have a greenhouse. The temperature varies between 50 and 90 degrees. At night, I put a heater on and a vent during the day to keep it below 90. I experimented with some lettuce, kale, basil, and tomato seeds a week ago in an egg carton. Nothing sprouting yet. What vegetable seeds can I start now? Also, should I keep the soil moist by spraying it every day?
Yes, I spray mine every day. I take my little mister. I try to keep a high humidity in the greenhouse. So a lot of times I'm just out there spraying it in the air at the same time, the mist. I don't know if Ray said he was utilizing heat mats or not to start some of those things. Heat mats, I've got all kinds of stuff. I've already started peppers. I've told you that. I've got tomato plants that are just starting. I have cabbage, broccoli, Chinese cabbage. I have some marigolds. I have some squashes that I have planted. Peas I've talked about. I have onions. I have sage. I have marjoram. All of those things you can plant. And again, any spinach, any lettuce. I have lettuce out there. Cilantro, that's something that could go now. And again, there were at least 15 items I know that you can start. I have a list of them, believe it or not. 15 vegetables that you can start before the last frost. Tomatoes, sweet peppers, chili peppers, eggplant, peas, beans, onions, leeks. That was fava beans, by the way. Leeks, celery, I plant that. Lettuce, spinach, and other greens. Cabbage, kale, cauliflower, carrots, and beets. And again, you'll find that it provides the temperature of what they will germinate at, like tomatoes 60 to 80 degrees, sweet peppers 65 to 95, chili peppers, heat mats 65 degrees plus, eggplants 75 degrees, peas 40 to 75 degrees, beans, fava beans 55 degrees, onions, they'll go down as low as 35 degrees to germinate, leeks 35 degrees, but best germination is between 65 and 85. Celery 40. I mean, the list goes on.
Where is that information? Is that from an
right here? Right here.
Oh, you just have it yourself.
I got it off. I can't say that I got it off New Mexico
I wonder if you would cut and paste it into a document that we could share when we
I'll
share
be
this
happy
video.
to. Yeah,
Okay, that would be helpful, because I had a couple of questions and responses about heat mats. Ray says he doesn't have heat mats, but also Antoinette was wondering where you get heat mats.
You can find them online. Look around. You can find them very cheap. You can find them very expensive. They also have commercial ones. We have one commercial one that my wife has had for 35 years. And then other ones, they're typically the size to take a 1020 tray. You can put a 1020 tray on them. And that's why I like using 6-packs, because in a 6-pack, I can scatter a lot of seeds, 12, 18 plants probably that I can get out of every little, I can get 3 in each one. So times 6 is 18 plants. And by the time I transplant them into the small cup before they go into the bigger cup, I can get 18 of these in a 1020 tray to hold them, to make certain that I can transplant them around in the greenhouse, etc. So you can find and I want to say the last one I probably bought online somewhere, I probably got for $10. You know what? I tell you, look at yard sales too, estate sales. I come up with, I know that sounds weird, but I come up with a lot of stuff. My wife is an artist, does recycling. And she taught me recycle, reuse, and upcycle. And I do that with a lot of stuff. Well, some of my elevated benches was old workbench in the garage. I wasn't going to throw it away, but I didn't want it either. So I put a surround on it, and all of a sudden it became an elevated lettuce bed for me. So you can do that. You can find those things anywhere. Just look around.
All right. There's someone here who's having problems. He's looking at the seed packets, and the germination time is not listed, but it looks like these are all tomatoes. Did all tomato seeds germinate in about the same amount of time, or is that not a rule of thumb?
I defer that one to Sam, but the other thing I would say is it's not always on the seed packets, but in your catalogs, typically it tells you generically what most of them will do. And I don't want to name any seed catalogs for fear of somebody saying, but if you look at a lot of seed catalogs, they'll say generically, this is what it takes. I have a book that I cut things out of the seed catalog. And then like every year when I'm starting tomato, I keep the seed packet in the back of the sleeve. I take a picture of what it looks like. I talk about the days that it takes to come to maturity, the days for germination, whether it's determinate or indeterminate. That's like I said, Thomas Jefferson said, keep your diary, keep your book on. No, seriously, it makes a lot of sense. And you'll find that wherever you bought those seeds, if you bought it from a catalog, now and a lot of times it's hidden on the side. I mean, it's in such fine print that you do need a magnifying glass, but you check some of the other ones. Generically, they should all be the same. And again, I'm going to let Sam answer, because I know that if you have the right humidity, the right sun, the right heat, they're going to germinate faster than if it's cold. I mean, pepper seeds are probably going to germinate for you too, even if you don't soak them. And if you don't have heat mats, it's just going to take 30 days, 35 days, something like that. I've done it before, so I can say, yeah, that probably is the way it's going to work. Okay.
All right.
I would like to add, Jim, you're right about that. It's very important for people to realize what kind of conditions the seeds need to have. If your tomatoes are my seeds, I put them indoors on a heat mat. They germinate in about 3 days. My peppers, I soak in chamomile. They germinate in maybe 3 to 5 days, 7 at the latest. Okay. But that's because they're indoors, so the temperatures are staying around 70 degrees, plus they're on a heat mat.
Yep.
So I would say if it's much cooler than that, the individual that's trying to germinate tomatoes at 50 degrees, it may take you a couple of weeks. Don't give up on them, but understand that that condition is a little cool for what those seeds really need.
Sam, if I could also add to that, remember last year, tomato wise, when in the first 3 weeks of June, it was above 90 degrees every day. The tomatoes did not go to fruit during that time frame. You were rewarded with tomatoes if you just kept watering your plants. They came later, but it was a weird year last year for tomatoes. And plants are the same way. Again, like Sam says, if you're not using a heat mat, if you don't have the right moisture, if you tried killing them by overwatering them, by drowning them, you're going to have issues. So look at all those conditions. Again, I like a mister.
All right, thank you. We've got a little bit more time. So if you've got a question, if you want to just unmute and ask Jim yourself, I've also put into the chat some of the circulars from NMSU. And also we have seed libraries local if you're in a bind, and they're free seeds that have been sourced or saved from local gardeners at many of our libraries. So I put that in the chat as well. NMSU also offers a free gardening webinar called Ready, Set, Grow, and there's a link for that if you're interested in that. So are there any, go ahead, Jim.
No, I just wanted to mention that some seeds are going to last a long period of time, but most of them, they're going to tell you like probably 3 years, your germination rate is going to fall off tremendously. And just because the packet is only costing you 25 cents or 50 cents doesn't mean it's bad seeds. You may not get as many seeds. It's interesting, you can find packets out there, same manufacturer, different prices, but also different gram amounts of seeds in them. So look at that when you're looking at them. But I had some cherry peppers that were 15 years old, and I probably planted 24 of them. 3 of them came up, but they were 15 years old, and they were just in a seed box that my wife had. And I said, well, I'm going to try it. So I did get some out of them, even though they were that old. Okay, and it's just an aside.
As we go further and further, it's more of a reminder that gardening is a lot of experimenting and trying and failing and trying again.
And if I can do it, anybody can do it. I assure you of that. I mean,
well, thank you, Jim. Nancy says, thank you. It's you're a good speaker. She attended the tour last September, and remember how open you were to questions. Thank you for
well,
that.
I'm glad that you got to come. Thank you for attending. And don't forget, we put this seminar on every month, Meg, don't we? The fourth Friday of every month?
The fourth Friday. So next month in March, we're going to be talking about alternative gardening techniques. And so you can sign up for that on the Gardening with the Masters online website, which is on the Sandoval Extension Master Gardeners website. But thank you, Jim, for today and for all the information that you shared with us. And thank you to all of our participants.
Thank you all.
And yeah, we wish you luck and providence in your seed starting and your plant tending. Oh, and here we have an announcement for the good of the group that there will be a seed exchange on March 6th at Cazuela Restaurant, 9 to noon. I don't know anything more about that, but that's from, we'll see if we can get more information about that since that's coming up.
And don't be afraid to ask some of the master gardeners if they have extra seeds. I know that I grow a lot of seeds. A lot of them go down to the New Beginnings gardening project that we have in Bernalillo. And sometimes people come by and go, Jim, I'd really like to try some paprika seeds, and I'll give them to them. I mean, I've got pill bottles full of them that I save, and I know they're good because they're growing from seed this year. So The seed exchange. Okay, good. It's
Michelle Goody, who was our presenter last month, said that the seed exchange that Ginger mentioned about the restaurant is on the Facebook on the Facebook page called Gardening in Rio Rancho. And we do have, if you get stuck anytime with a seed, with a plant, with a tree, we have a helpline on our website. So you can email your question to a master gardener and you'll get a response that way. So please do the email helpline I put at the top of the chat.
and join our Facebook group too for Sandoval County Master Gardeners. We have a Facebook page that'll keep you informed of all this stuff.
That's right, right.
Okay?
We've got one more question here. Do orcha seeds
Or
need soaking?
okra.
Okra. Oh gosh. I thought it was you.
I had an okra. I do not soak mine. I prefer Clemson spineless. We grow a lot of okra because we like pickled okra. So again, background wise and growing up and canning, we can a lot of, yesterday I canned roughly 12 pint and a half of asparagus because it was on sale. And I won't get 12 and a half pints of asparagus out of my garden this year, even though I have a raised bed devoted entirely to that. But I do love fresh asparagus and I do love it in salad. So we did that yesterday because it is on sale at one of the stores this week. And so that's stuff to look for whenever you're out there. Become a canner too, probably. There are certain things you can, certain things are better frozen. Save your fresh herbs. Put them in water. They're great for soups and stocks and during the winter. If you have a lot of different things you can do, cilantro right now, you can do that. You got cilantro is going to bolt early in the summer. So you just take it, put it in water, freeze it, and you got fresh cilantro that you can add to whatever you need it in a later day. And I'd like to thank everybody too, including all the master gardeners. Their wealth of information, they've taught me a lot. The website has it all on there. So look at that and look at New Mexico State University. And if you're smart and you want to really garden the rest of your life, become a master gardener. Join us. We have every year we have something that's going on. That's how I started. But the real reason is my wife wanted me out of the house. That was the real reason that I became a master gardener. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Jim. And we're going to have this recording posted on our website. So we'll have the recording there, and we'll condense all the resources into a document that we'll also have there. So please check back there, and we hope to see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Do I need to do a post